All right, so what we have here is a GM 6L80 automatic transmission and LOJ Conversions 6L80 to TX15B transfer case adapter. And we're going to cover some specifics about the installation of this adapter onto a 6L80 transmission, which will allow you to bolt any Nissan Xterra, Frontier, Titan, Armada, Pathfinder, part-time four-wheel drive transfer case onto one of these transmissions. One of the key things to understand is that this transfer case adapter is compatible with both two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive transmissions. This particular transmission is a two-wheel drive unit, and you can tell by the length of the output shaft here on the transmission. For comparison, this is a four-wheel drive 6L80 output shaft, and if this was installed inside the transmission, you can tell how much shorter it would be. Otherwise, the two transmissions are the same. In order to use a two-wheel drive transmission, you have to remove the extension housing from the transmission, which we've done already. And then you can see in the transmission, once it's removed, there's a port right here and a port right here, which will both need to be plugged. Conveniently, they're the perfect size to run a 1/4-inch NPT tap into. And once tapped, you can just put in some 1/4-inch NPT pipe plugs. And then right here on the output shaft, you can see how that's open. There's actually oiling holes here. What you need to install is an extension housing seal from a four-wheel drive application. And that simply taps into this opening to seal the back end of the transmission. And that's basically the difference between a two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. Once you've done that, the output shaft on the transmission will need to be cut down shorter in order to work with our transfer case adapter. So part of the transfer case adapter includes this spud shaft adapter that converts the 32 spline GM output shaft to a 32 spline male Nissan output shaft. They're both identical in diameter and in spline count, but they are not the same. And this adapter is required to make the two work because of the pitch of the splines rather than the count and number of splines. Whether your 6L80 is a two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive trans, you'll still need to cut back the output shaft. It's just how much is going to vary depending on which version of the transmission it is. So the way we figure this out is the total length from the face of where the adapter plate bolts to the end of the output shaft with the splined adapter on it needs to be 5 7/16 inches. So what we do is we take the output shaft adapter, the splined adapter, slide it onto the output shaft, and then you can use a straight edge and a tape measure to measure the length from the end of the output shaft to the face of the transmission. You take your tape measure and you can take a straight edge right on the end of the output shaft and just measure from the face of the transmission to the end of the straight edge. And right here, I've got 9 3/8 of an inch. So then you write down that measurement, 9 3/8 of an inch, and subtract 5 7/16 of an inch. So when I do that math, the length here of 9 3/8 of an inch minus the 5 7/16 of an inch that we need this to be, the difference between the two is just under 4 inches. It's 3 15/16. So what I can do then is pull this shaft off, and on the output shaft of the transmission, measure back that 9 15/16. And if I cut that off there, slide this adapter on, and then remeasure the length at the end, I should be exactly at my target of 5 7/16 of an inch. Now, because the output shaft is made of a hardened steel, you're not going to be able to cut this with a hacksaw or a sawzall or a bandsaw. You're going to have to use an angle grinder, a grinding wheel, to cut through this. So I'm going to cut this off with the grinding wheel straight through the line I just made, and then I'm going to use a flap disc to kind of chamfer the edge again so that it doesn't have a bunch of sharp corners on the spline. Then we'll put it back together and remeasure. Because this is a two-wheel drive transmission and I haven't plugged all the holes in the back of the case yet, like we discussed earlier, I'm covering up the back of the trans with this painter's tape to just prevent any grindings from getting into the transmission while I cut. Like I said, I then take a flap disc so once you've verified that the output shaft adapter then slides on easily, so you don't have any burrs here on the end of the output shaft spline, clean up the mess you made, the dusty mess, and then pull off your tape. And reinstall your output shaft there, and then remeasure. And we have exactly 5 7/16 of an inch. Now that you know that your output shaft is cut down the correct amount, you can actually install the adapter. Now in this video, I still haven't installed the seal here yet, or the plugs. I'm going to go ahead and install the adapter so you can see how it goes. If this was a 4-wheel drive trans, there would already be a seal here, and there would already be plugs in these holes. Because this was a 2-wheel drive trans, I'll have to do that later, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to bolt it together so you can see the process. The adapter itself is actually a 2-piece adapter, so there's Allen keys inside to separate the 2 halves of the adapter. So once you have the adapter separated into its 2 pieces, the first half goes onto the transmission. There's some M8 socket head bolts here, or M10 socket head bolts with an 8mm Allen key. Once that's bolted in place, the adapter itself can be installed. The second half of the adapter can be installed. Now at this point, for a sanity check, you put your splined adapter back on, go across the face of the transfer case adapter and measure down. And you should be 1 1/16 inches. Now at this point I'm at exactly 1 inch. There is some forgiveness here.